Ladies and gentlemen, it is Thursday, October 4th, as the moment I'm recording this, and it's time for a show. I'm sorry about the past few days, the creative juices haven't been flowing too well. Also, school. Yeah. Uh, yeah. Today's subject is something that I hope people understand is important to not so much the creative process of games, but the process of creating games, which is going to sound kind of odd. But I'm going to discuss why comparing games just doesn't work. Most, if not all the time. Now, granted, we can compare games a lot, about a lot of things. You can compare the multiplayer of one game to the multiplayer of another game. That's fine. But if the first game is Call of Duty and the second game is Assassin's Creed, then all you can compare is the fact that there's a progression-based system and one features a lot more running and gunning and one's a lot more about stealth. And that's it. If you say, I prefer the Call of Duty one because I like running around and shooting dudes, that's cool. But if you say, I prefer the Call of Duty one because it's just better, then that's not okay. And that's because what's better isn't always right. But then again, what's better is defined by your own personal standards. So is it right? That's the question. I mean, I'll take, for example, Torchlight 2 and Borderlands 2. Sequels to games that have a very Diablo-rooted source. I mean, Torchlight 2 was made by the dudes who worked on Diablo 1 and 2. So, it's a much more worthy successor to Diablo than Diablo 3 ever would be. But there you go. In that sense, you should compare the games by their loot. Which game has better randomized loot? Which game gives me more exciting loot? Which game handles that loot system better? Which game feels more randomized? Which game is better for farming it? That's what you should compare the games by. Not by how their story plays out, or by how the gameplay works. Because whereas Torchlight is similar to Diablo in this isometric, you have your health globule and your mana globule, and you have a hotbar of spells, or abilities, whichever you choose. Borderlands is a shooter. It's all about gunplay. It's all about modifying the gunplay of an ability, but still focusing on you shooting dudes in the face. Not about you casting fireballs at the dude. There's just a very severe difference there. Comparing the combat gameplay of those two is like comparing, I always use the example of an apple to a pear. What I mean by that is, apples and pears grow on trees. Apples and pears go great in fruit salad, and apples and pears can be sliced and fed to kids. However, a pear is typically green or yellow, whereas an apple can be a whole spectrum of colors. And whereas a pear, you would usually keep the stem on, an apple, you would take the stem off. And whereas apples have one season, pears have a different season. And there's a lot of other things that you can dissonant from the other item that you must take into account. And this is why I don't get when people say, oh, Torchlight's better than Borderlands. In what way? Oh, the combat's better. No. Torchlight would have to be better than Diablo for that to be something that I could comprehend. Because I have to have something to base it off of. If I'm basing click, 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 versus click and spray with a gun, or click and then be accurate with that, or throwing grenades, versus click, 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 expel, click, expel, click, expel, that's two different styles of combat. And I hope people understand that. And if you can't, then it doesn't make sense to continue doing comparisons. Another comparison that people can make is Half-Life to literally any first-person shooter ever. Half-Life is held as an example of what storytelling is and how you mix in the gameplay and how not to do cutscenes. And you hold it up versus today's sort of opiate of the people in terms of games, the Call of Duty. It's, very cutscene driven and, very linear and very, explosive. And people will very easily say, well, Half-Life is clearly better than Call of Duty in that sense. And while in most cases I wouldn't hesitate to agree with you, it must be understood that when you compare them, you're comparing them based on just the story. Because that's all Half-Life has. And granted, Half-Life has a huge modding community, but when you look at what's out of the box, maybe you end up getting a better experience out of Call of Duty in the end. Not just because of the story, but because of the multiplayer and whatever cooperative mode exists. Hopefully Black Ops 2 ends up being an apocalyptically good game, which it very well will be. Now, if you look back and you say, well, wait a second, they're both first-person shooters. They grow from trees. They both have a wide variety of weapons. You can slice them up. You can put them in fruit salad. They have very rabid fan bases, that's for sure. And you wouldn't be wrong. They are both very similar games. But when you look at the goals that the game is trying to achieve, that is in the end where a comparison is very defined by the developers. Which is why going to the level of that, I can't do. Comparing very story-based FPS like Half-Life to a very action-based FPS like Call of Duty just doesn't work from just one man. Because if you look at the design documents of each of those games, I have not. But I can only assume that whereas Half-Life is very focused on the narrative, Call of Duty has to split all of its time with its other modes. So it must be understood that all games are different, all gamers are different, and all opinions can be mixed depending on how much caffeine I've had during the day, which is none at the moment. C'est la vie. Thank you very much for checking out today's video. I shall hope to bring you more very soon, probably tomorrow. But nonetheless, I shall leave you with my classic saying, see you later. Or next time, whichever it happens to be.